Okay. Okay, so welcome to BCP Council Eastern Planning Committee, Thursday, 20th of March 2025. So if I can hand over to Democratic Services Officer for introductions.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point, the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of the building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum. Mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off mics and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So item number 1 is apologies, please.
So apologies have been received from Councillor Marianne Le Pedevin and substitute members. Councillor Adrian Chapman-Law is substituting for Councillor Le Pedevin this morning.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Okay, so I'm Councillor Paul Hilliard, the Chair of Committee. If we can go around the members introducing.
Councillor Michael Tarling for Christchurch Ward.
Councillor Gillian Martin, Boscombe West.
Councillor Chapman-Law for Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Councillor Joe Salmon for Moordown.
Councillor Joe Clements, Penhill Ward.
Lawrence Williams, Councillor for Littledown and Iford.
Matt Gillett, Councillor for Talbot Woods.
Councillor Flagg, Councillor for Burton Grange Ward.
Toby Slade, Muscliffe and Stratton Park.
Councillor Felicity Rice, Councillor for Oakdale.
Laura Sims, Planning Officer.
Simon Gould, Development Management Manager.
Thank you for that. And we're also joined by Ms Holyoke, who's Democratic Services Officer. Item 3 is declarations of interest of anything we're discussing today. Councillor Williams.
Yes, I'm acquainted with one of the objectors. Okay. Thank you.
I live in the ward. I live round the corner from this place, actually. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Okay. Item 4 is confirmation of the minutes of our meeting of the 20th of February 2025. So we've seen those. Anything to raise? Everyone happy with approving those? Yep, that's approved. Thank you. Item 5 is public issues. So after the officer presentation, we will hear any public speakers, followed by any ward councillors who wish to speak. So moving to item 6, schedule of planning application 6A is 27 Wolverton Road, and presenting officer is Ms Sims. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. So the application is 27 Wolverton Road, and it's a change of use from a dwelling house class C3 into a house of multiple occupation class C4, and I'm recommending approval. 27 Wolverton Road is located within a residential area of Boscombe East and Folkestone Ward of Bournemouth. The site sits south of the railway on the corner with Langton Road to its northern boundary and Wolverton Road to its eastern, as you can see there. This is the red line plan. The garage to the west of the site has been removed, which is confirmed by photos taken by myself on site visits. The aerial view of the property, you can see it's a detached 2-storey dwelling. To the left, the photo to the left shows the elevation fronting Wolverton Road. The dwelling is a detached 2-storey and characterised by red brick and white detailing, as well as bay windows, which are distinctive to Wolverton Road. To the right shows the elevation facing number 22 Langton. Here you can see that the garage has been removed, as previously mentioned, and the site also has a large flat roof dormer with no windows to accommodate second floor habitable space. So regards the HMO density, the above map marks out the 100-metre area, which is used to calculate the percentage of HMOs. 117 properties were identified to be in the area, and there were only 2 identified as HMOs, which is number 42 Wolverton and number 18 Langton Road. Not including the proposal, this gives a percentage of 1.7%. So including the proposed site, it would give a percentage of 2.6%, which is obviously well below the 10% laid out in policy CS24 of the Bournemouth Core Strategy. Therefore, the proposal is acceptable in terms of this. Finally, the floor plans provided show the dwelling would accommodate 6 people in single bedrooms, all of which are served by a personal ensuite. The dwelling would also provide 4 large communal spaces with an additional snug/office on the first floor, and the second floor would be served by its own kitchenette and living space. The living conditions for future residents would comply with the national space standards and create good quality of life for residents. The use of the dwelling would remain as residential, and the site would not be considered as harmful intensification to the plot. The dwelling is detached and set on a corner. Noise produced by the dwelling would be as a result of residential activity and therefore not a concern. Additionally, the applicant has provided space for off-road parking and cycle store, with details to be confirmed in a condition, which is found within the supporting statement. Overall, the proposal would not harm the appearance of the surrounding area, would not cause over-intensification of the site, and therefore it complies with policy CS41. Additionally, the proposal would not exceed the limitations set out in policy CS24 and provide sufficient amenity space for future occupants. I therefore recommend this application for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Sims. So if we now, Ms Holyoake, objectors?
Yeah, so we have 2 registered speakers in objection, Della and Leo Guizdala. If you'd like to come to the table. And whenever you're ready, I think Mrs Guizdala, you're going to speak first.
Good morning. I speak for all my neighbours who live in this densely populated streets around this development, and we live opposite it at 23 Langton Road. We all object vehemently to the approval of this application, and I hope you've all had time to read the objections. I've watched Boscombe degenerate over the years and become described nationally as a deprived area. The proliferation of HMO developments C3 to C4 by greedy landlords has been a main contributor. Deprived areas experience a high concentration of vulnerable households. Introducing another HMO here will lead to increased social problems and our neighbourhood being overwhelmed by transient residents. On a radial basis, we have 13 registered HMOs in the streets near this property. This is a linear one on your display, including a drug rehab HMO and a student HMO just doors away from this development. And research recently by ourselves has identified approximately 10 more unregistered HMOs in the streets around here. 10 more. We've knocked doors, spoken to neighbours. There is absolutely no need for another HMO here. There's been a decline in the demand for this type of generally temporary housing solution. It doesn't provide the best standard of living for tenants. Their introduction into areas of family housing destroys communities and the spirit, and it hinders regeneration efforts. That's important. BCP claim that their plan is to focus on housing for families and first-time buyers, not on increasing the density of the population with more HMOs. I understand that the default position of BCP is not to allow any more HMOs, and this is totally supported by the Boscombe and Folkestone Neighbourhood Plan. The transient nature of HMO residents impacts community cohesion because of a high turnover of occupants. We've got a strong and supportive community in our neighbourhood of young and old people, working people and unemployed people, families. Many have lived here for decades. There's stability in our neighbourhood. Another HMO of 6 tenants will erode this and lead to a decline in our quality of life. HMOs are associated with increased noise, antisocial behaviour, drug and drink problems, lack of respect for neighbours and littering. Too many, and they cause an imbalanced and unsustainable community and a negative impact on the surroundings. We've had shopping trolleys left on outside this property, broken bikes, household rubbish. HMOs need intense and on-site management to avoid disrupting the peaceful enjoyment of local residents. The landlords of this development live 16 miles away in Lymington. They rarely visit.
This development is more hostile accommodation than a home. There are overcrowding concerns when too many people live in a single property, leading to inadequate and unhealthy living conditions and frequent disturbances. This house provides very small rooms and insufficient communal spaces. There is little outside space for recreation. These issues will inevitably lead to tension and bad feeling among occupants, causing them to loiter outside the property, adding to noise and congestion and disturbing the peace. Without on-site management to manage these issues, they could become out of control. There are signs of neglect outside the house, including, as I said, abandoned shopping trolleys, etc. There have been regular problems with noise from Airbnb lets, which have been happening here, including drunken guests arguing in the street in the early hours, involving the police. Certainly noise problems will increase if it is let to 6 permanent households. Parking and traffic congestion, currently a total nightmare for residents and a major problem. There are more vehicles than available spaces. Locals park wherever they can to access their homes, and this has impeded emergency vehicles, the refuse lorries and delivery vans. An HMO for 6 tenants here would increase the congestion. This address has only 2 viable off-road parking spaces. HMO accommodation offers shared communal living and is not attractive to most. It is often the choice of adults who have little choice in where they live. Nearby Boscombe Precinct is policed because of the problem with undesirable and antisocial behaviour by males. There are 3 nearby schools surrounding the location of this property. Young pupils walk past this property twice a day, and parents have expressed their concern about who might occupy this address. We have a lot of privacy issue. The windows of the first and second floors on the front and the north side of the building look directly into our homes, particularly our first floor bedroom windows, and Airbnb guests have looked into our homes with binoculars. Rooms in an HMO are used intensively due to the lack of other sizable rooms available for day-to-day activities. Sitting areas may be placed next to windows and overlook the rooms of neighbouring properties. These rooms are extremely small, the largest being, to my calculations, 7 square metres. We will need to keep our curtains closed. This development has been based purely on financial gain. The developers have no connection with our community and have shown no interest in our concerns.
Amen.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Okay, and speaking in support, we first have Adelaide West, followed by Diana Parish.
Good morning, my name's Adelaide West. I'm one of the directors of West Property. I've been a landlord in Bournemouth for over a decade, and I've run 2 successful Airbnb businesses, both with superhost status. Firstly, I want to bring some much needed reassurance to our neighbours here and also to you on the committee. The term HMO comes with multiple negative connotations, particularly in Boscombe. A lot of these places have been known to be substandard with regard to appearance, facilities and general upkeep, and this can lead to undesirables renting them. Our vision with this property is to challenge the stigma attached to HMOs and to provide a really good standard of living accommodation, a home if you like, for our tenants. Each of our 6 bedrooms are of very good size and boast an ensuite, and there's communal space on every floor. Our aim is to attract people who are looking for a long-term home, and indeed a number of our tenants have been with us for upwards of 4 years. Many of these are looking to buy property in the local area, settle down and have a family, and our properties allow them to help save for a deposit. With regard to the off-site management, we've been an Airbnb superhost for a number of years, and we're on call 24/7 as and when required. Being a small local business, I, for example, live in Charminster, means that we usually have a turnaround time of under an hour for emergencies. Our neighbours have been worried about bin storage, and we're required to put 1 standard wheelie bin of each type, household, recycling and food waste, per 5 people. We can confirm we are supplying 2 bins of each type for 6 people. These bins are to be housed in a bin store at the front of the property as per our plans. With regard to parking, our 20-year experience of landlording tells us that only 25 to 30% of HMO tenants have a vehicle. We have provided 2 very generous parking spaces that we feel should suffice. Lastly, we'd just like to remind our neighbours and the council that there are less than 10% of registered HMOs within 100 metres of our property. Thank you. I'll hand over to Diana now.
I'm Diana Parish. I'm also a director of West Property. I've been an HMO landlord for 19 plus years in Bournemouth. And during that time, I've never received a complaint about any of my properties or my tenants. Our tenancy agreement, signed by all tenants, complies with best practice tenancy management, the relevant provisions of the Housing Act 2004, and is in full accordance with the Management of Housing in HMO Regulations 2006. It's made clear to our tenants from the outset that they may not cause nuisance, annoyance or damage either to their fellow tenants or to any neighbours, which is in any way illegal, immoral or damaging. This includes noise and illegal substances. We have a rigorous referencing process which covers both work and personal aspects. Several of my tenants are nurses. I have teachers, I have care workers, a physiotherapist, and I have office and business managers and shop assistants. All are working professionals. They are responsible individuals. I think there was a question from Highways about the bike shed. I can confirm it has Sheffield stands, interior and exterior lights, and an access door of 1100 millimetres as required. Access is also via 2 coded locks. Finally, I can confirm that we more than meet the criteria, including fire regulations. We've consulted and have a fire risk assessment. The bathroom facilities, the kitchen facilities, the room sizes, living room sizes, dining room sizes, natural lighting, artificial lighting, ventilation and water all comply with the listed BCP amenity standards for HMOs. Given that we are compliant with everything, we have really worked hard, we trust that this application will be approved. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And finally, Councillor George Farquhar.
Good morning, committee. My name is Councillor George Farquhar and I'm the ward councillor for the ward in which I live, which is Boscombe East and Folkestone. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address the committee today. Small declaration, I was approached on this matter and this particular application by a resident, but I'm appearing today not as a representative of any resident, as a representative of myself who lives in the ward and has lived there since 2011. I moved into the ward in 2011 and became the ward councillor in 2019. In that time, the local neighbourhood underwent a process of a neighbourhood plan. Neighbourhood plan was quite intensive and it involved many consultations and many workshops, and I myself was involved with those before I was a councillor. The neighbourhood plan was actually passed and it was approved by this council, BCP, in October of, it went to referendum in October of 2019, and those that responded were in the 93 percentile of saying that the neighbourhood plan met their needs. And it was approved at a slightly later date by the council and was taken into consideration as a material planning consideration. I'm concerned that in the papers that the Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan is not referred to in any way, shape or form. This, I think, is a maybe an oversight, but it's misleading to the committee that there is already a substantial statutory document that should be under consideration when considering applications within the Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan area, which includes this particular application. For those of you that are not familiar with neighbourhood plan, or those that are maybe viewing online, I wanted to just give you a little summary and a conclusion about it. The neighbourhood plan comprises policies that have been drafted to reflect the local community's vision for the area. They are the local policies of relevance to the neighbourhood plan area. The policies provide a practical framework in which to assess planning applications. This has been empowering, creative exercise and will improve the local environment in a way that people live their lives in the neighbourhood plan area. It's consistent with point 1 of the core planning principles set out in paragraph 7. And I'll just read that for you, because this is why people voted for it in the 93 percentile. Genuinely plan, led empowering local people to shape the surroundings with succinct local and neighbourhood plans, setting out a positive vision for the future. They should provide a practical framework within which decisions on planning applications can be made with a high degree of predictability and efficiency. The reason that I raise this is because I'm concerned, because I think there should have been objections that highlighted BAP 8. BAP 8 is one of the policies within the neighbourhood plan. I just wanted to read that out to you just now. And BAP 8 is houses of multiple occupation. We must be aware a little bit of the history since I moved down in 2011, that HMOs within the Boscombe Folkestone neighbourhood area have been a huge problem that's been addressed at a national level to improve the situations. So those people that are long-term residents in Boscombe are quite aware of the impact that HMOs and unregistered HMOs have to the particular area. But this is what the neighbourhood plan has to say about it. BAP 8, houses of multiple occupation, HMOs and bedsits. The change of use for a house in multiple occupation will only be permitted where there is no harm to the character and appearance of the buildings or adjacent buildings. The design, layout, intensity of use of the building would not have an unacceptable impact on neighbouring residential amenities. Internal and external amenity space, refuge storage, letterboxes, doorbells and cars and bicycle parking would be provided of an appropriate quantity and would be of a high standard so as not to harm the visual amenity. The proposal would not cause unacceptable highway problems or exacerbate on-street parking pressures to an unacceptable degree, and the proposal would not result in an over-concentration of HMOs in any one area of the ward, to the extent that it would change the character of the area and undermine the maintenance and balance of a mixed local community in accordance with the development plan. The conversion or redevelopment of existing HMOs to larger residential units in accordance to other policies in this plan will be supported. It's a very good point which is actually raised in the way that HMOs are actually calculated as for their intensification. I know, living in the ward, that we have many unregistered HMOs. So perhaps the question which I should ask in my capacity here is what number of bedrooms, if that's the right terminology, or occupations, actually qualifies to be a registered HMO. And there are many unregistered HMOs, and I support the fact that the self-study by the residents behind me indicates that there's a lot more than 2, even though 2 might be actually registered. There's a lot more HMOs. So thank you very much for your time, and I would urge the committee to question why the Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan wasn't referred to in this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Okay, so if I can ask Ms Sims and Mr Gould, if there's anything what was mentioned, I think, again, if you can focus on the Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, that was purely a mistake, and for not adding it into the report. It was considered, I just didn't reference it in the report. Even still, when looking at what BAP 8 says, it would still comply with this. It doesn't harm the character, it wouldn't be unacceptable in terms of its layout or intensity, and it wouldn't result in an over concentration of HMOs within the area of Wolverton Road. So this could be added, but it still would be considered acceptable in terms of CS41, CS24 and BAP 8.
Mr Gould?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I can just sort of add a bit to that. When the neighbourhood plan was obviously formulated, it had to go through a series of hoops to ensure that it was complying with the existing local plans, and obviously within the references made by Councillor Farquhar to BAP 8, which is a specific policy relating to HMOs, that the wording in the supporting preamble to that policy 8.48 specifically mentions CS24, obviously the core strategy, which is the main policy that Ms Sims has looked at. So the two documents are very intertwined, Chairman. So they had to relate to each other and build on each other. Now, clearly, some people in the room hold the view that the proposal would be harmful to the character in the area, but obviously through the assessment that's been done by Ms Sims, we've concluded that we feel it actually accords with CS24, and obviously by inference then it also accords with BAP8. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for confirming. So, as questions, Councillor Salmon.
Yeah, sorry, can you just clarify? Because my understanding was we've got no local plan at the minute, or no up-to-date local plan, and so if there was anything in our local plan that was against this application, that would be something that we wouldn't be able to give an awful lot of weight in this discussion. Is the same the case for neighbourhood plans? So even if this neighbourhood plan said no HMOs, full stop, whatever in Boscombe, my gut feeling is we would probably have to ignore that anyway. Mr. Gould?
Yeah, no, Councillor. The neighbourhood plan is very much up to date and adopted. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it's fairly recently, within the last 3 or 4 years. So the reference that you make to the local plan is obviously the BCP, the new BCP emerging local plan, which is obviously, as most people in the room now, has not got past its first examination in public process. So I would advise members to just leave that plan over there. It carries negligible weight at the moment, and to just focus on the adopted local plans that we have, which is obviously in this instance the core strategy, which relates to CS24, and obviously you've got your neighbourhood plan, your Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan, which are very much, they're very much up to date. Certainly the neighbourhood plan.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salmon. Yep.
So just to be really sensible, then it sounds like the report is missing the application of the details in the local plan, and I know we've had them explained to us here today, but I'm very boring and I like a bit of procedure. I would quite like it if we could potentially defer this application and look at it when it's actually properly done, with all of the information in front of us in the report, rather than flying by the seat of our pants. Is that something that when we move to the debate that we will be able to do, to go away and complete that work and look at the application again?
Well, I think, as the officer said, we've got the core strategy and we've got the neighbourhood plan alongside it. And whilst the neighbourhood plan wasn't specifically referenced in the officer's report, the points are also covered in the analysis of CS24. So we're talking about the character. There's no change of the actual structure and other aspects. So although, as I say, acknowledge that it's not specifically called out in the neighbourhood plan, I think it is covered. But we'll see what other members think about that when we come to the debate. So questions first. So Councillor Chapman-Law.
Yeah, just on the sort of the HMO intensity. Obviously, you said that there's 2, I think it was, but obviously there's a bit of disagreement because the residents are suggesting that there's more than there are other unregistered HMOs. A couple of questions on that. So, at what point does the property have to register as a HMO? So, if you've got 2 friends living together, in a flat, obviously that's just 2 friends living together. But what point does it become a HMO? And how do we know that there aren't unregistered HMOs in the local area, and what we're doing there?
Sims?
I'll defer the first question to Mr. Gould. But in terms of the calculation, it was used with the council tax records and what we have in the area. So this is how we know what are registered HMOs. Obviously, unregistered HMOs, we have no awareness of their presence unless they get raised. So it's something, whilst unfortunate, it's not within our numbers to calculate the percentage of them.
Yeah, just to add to that, we can only work with the data obviously that we've got available to us. And as Ms Sims said, we look at things like council tax records, etc., to identify known HMOs. Your point about at what point does it become a HMO? Well, there's 2 types of HMOs really. So you've got your smaller ones, which this is one. So that would be between 4 and 6 people living together, who aren't related. And then once you get more than 6, it goes into a different use class called sui generis, and that would be from 7 upwards. And obviously, if we were in another town where they didn't have the Article 4 direction, then a change of use from a house C3 to it's a C4 C4 HMO would be permitted development. So they wouldn't have even needed to put the application. They could have just gone ahead and done it. But because we've got the Article 4 direction that covers the whole of Bournemouth and a small bit of pool around the university at Talbot, it removes that PD right, hence the need for the application.
Councillor Chairman.
So if they've got more than 4 or more, that would be classed as HMO.
Yeah, unrelated people. Yeah. Obviously, if you had a family of 7 people, that's not that's just a family.
Unrelated
because they're related.
Okay, thank you.
But on that point, obviously, I would encourage the residents to engage with their councillor about these unregistered, so that can be taken forward. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Actually, Councillor Chaplain-Law has stolen some of my thunder, but on a previous application, I in my ward, we had unregistered HMOs, which the planning department knew about, or at least they said they were aware of it. And I'm just wondering, are any of the current unregistered or unlicensed HMOs known to planning department? And if not, are they going to take steps to have a look?
Yeah, I think the point is taken that the residents will engage with their ward councillor and then take it up with the planning department. But yeah, obviously we weren't known with that. Councillor Martin.
I'm agreeing with Councillor Salmon actually to some extent about deferral for this, because that the neighbourhood plan should have been included in the report, and I don't think it's been looked into thoroughly, because HMOs do change the character of an area, because they do change the character of a property, because historically we have had problems with people. It's a high level of people taking drugs, for example, and problems with HMOs. So that will change the character of the area. To get more trouble in the area will change the character of the area. And I think the report should have included the neighbourhood plan and looked at it more thoroughly. Also, I think part of the neighbourhood plan talks about the effect on parking pressures. The parking pressures in that area, because I live near to there, are enormous at the moment. You just cannot get a parking place in the evening. So I think with another 6 people living there, it will be a complete and utter nightmare. And that should have been included in the neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan should have been included in your report.
Okay. So again, Ms Sims, if you can just confirm. So obviously we heard what BAP 8 covered, and that criteria. I think you covered most of them, if not all of them. So if you could just remind us of that, please.
Yeah, I covered all of it within the report. Whilst it isn't addressed specifically, I addressed the character and the appearance of the area as well. And in terms of its use and over-intensification, I don't think it would cause any harm. We don't know the type of people that will be in the property, but it's not large enough to cause any harmful over-intensification of use. And in terms of parking was assessed, highways were consulted, and they've provided off-road parking, which the parking standards SBD does say HMOs need 1 space as standard, and they also have provided cycle store. So they are in line with BAP 8 and the parking standards set out across BCP wide. So all the issues within that policy have been addressed. Whilst they haven't been referenced specifically regarding to BAP 8, they are all still fine and all still compliant, and therefore still recommending approval.
And the part about concentration, you're happy with the 100 metre?
Yeah. So like Mr. Gould raised as well, CS24 and BAP 8 are very intertwined and they're used hand in hand. So the over-intensification is not an issue, and it's still very much under the 10% set out in CS24.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Martin?
Can I raise a point of order? Are we in the debate now?
No, it's still questions.
Because I didn't hear a question from Councillor Martin.
I think she was just challenging about
the response.
Yeah. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. If the officers don't know the answer. Can we ask the applicants? Is it currently an Airbnb or is it currently a residential unit on an AST? And if it's an AST, so I may not have seen it in there, how many current tenants are in there at the moment?
Again, Mr. Gould, is it relevant?
Well, if you want the answer to the question, it's probably either going to be Miss Sims or the applicant in terms of who.
Does the committee want to know? I think we're getting some nods. So if the applicant come to the mic, please.
Hi, so this property has been run as an Airbnb for about a year and a half. And so there are currently no tenants in there. It's just a 6-bedroom empty house awaiting homes.
Thank you for clarifying. Did you want to follow up on that, Councillor Slade?
No, it helps me with some.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Martin?
Just one query. On the ground floor, next to the dining room, there's a WC straight off the dining room. Is that legal? Because it doesn't seem to be very hygienic to me to have a toilet straight off a kitchen or dining room.
Miss Sims?
And is there going to be a sink in there even? It just doesn't seem hygienic.
I'm unaware of the legality of having a WC off of a dining room. Obviously, the kitchen and dining room are separate. I'll defer to Mr. Gould if he knows.
I thought it used to be illegal to. I thought you had to have 2 doors between a kitchen or dining room.
It's a sort of open plan sort of space there, isn't it? The kitchen, the living room, and the dining room are all related to each other. It would probably be more of an issue if building control would pick up as opposed to plan. But I'm not aware of any in principle objection to that because it's essentially an open space. It's an open living space.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Chapman-Law.
So going back to the HMO thing, so what is the limit of intensity that wouldn't be okay? How many HMOs would actually be in the area for it to not be okay?
So as a result of CS24, over 10% of the amount of houses within 100 metres of the property. I can go back to the map which referring to it if that helps. So if there's 117 properties within 100 metres measured using the red line shown. So if 12 properties were HMOs, the 12th would then be refused because that's 10% of the area.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we shall go into debate. So, Councillor Gillett.
Yeah, obviously the going through the plan, it's a bit of a shame that it doesn't mention BP8. But going into BP8, the focus on BP8 is about removing all poor quality HMO accommodation that is not fit for habitation in the area, and replacing them with either larger flats or good quality HMOs. And when I'm looking at this in terms of the plan, and I know it's always controversial when you're putting an HMO into an area, but actually to be compliant with BP8, what should be being done is that the unlicensed HMOs, the HMOs which don't have planning permissions, the HMOs that if you go onto Open Rent and you see don't meet EPC requirements and don't meet the minimum room sizes, or because they've got sloping ceilings, those are the ones that need to be removed out of this equation, and that is what BP8 is focusing on. We've got a strong Article 4 in Bournemouth, and essentially that's, although I would have thought that probably 3 households might require unrelated might require planning, but anyway, that's an aside. But in terms of that, we've got a strong Article 4. It fits within the Article 4 because these other HMOs are not licensed. And when you look at this property, we're not dealing with room sizes that are too small. It's 2030 compliant for EPC. 40% of properties in Boscombe of the HMOs in Boscombe are not 2030 compliant with the environmental regulations. So this is looking at a good replacement of the other ones out there. And the job which hasn't been done is that we haven't been reporting in the unlicensed HMOs, and actually by having one which meets requirements, That means that when somebody tries to get a retrospective planning for a bad HMO down the road, then my understanding would be that that's more likely to be thrown out. So although I appreciate that HMOs are controversial, I can't see that it doesn't fit within the Article 4, CS24 or BAT 8.
Councillor Gillett. Councillor Salmon.
So this application's had multiple objections from people who live within the ward and from a ward councillor, all citing the neighbourhood plan, but the report doesn't have any reference to the neighbourhood plan in it. All of us read the reports, we rely on them being correct and that they reference all of the relevant documents we need to peruse and whatnot. I'm unwilling to approve or reject an application without that detail. I think we all should be, in the names of openness and transparency. I feel really uncomfortable if we now were to either approve or reject this application. I just want to propose that we defer it until the report can be brought back to us complete and correct. It's that simple. We shouldn't be going any further until we've done that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salmon. So just to confirm, Mr. Gould, if we defer it, what we've had before, and we just pick up it next time, is that better?
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely within the gift of planning committee to do that. That's the power that they hold, and obviously Councillor Salmon has set out the reasons why. So if members felt more comfortable for deferring it and then to come back with the references to the neighbourhood plan, we can certainly do that, Chair.
Okay, so Councillor Salmon has proposed that we defer. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Martin. Does anyone want to actually say anything else? Councillor Gillett.
When we say deferring it, BP8 is just on page 100 of the Boscombe neighbourhood plan, would take about 10-15 minutes to read. So we could potentially defer it for 15 minutes for people to read it, and then 15 minutes for them to think about it, and reconvene in half an hour as a potential alternative.
Councillor Rice.
Yeah, I just wanted a clarification that we have discussed this within the committee and we've had confirmation that it has been referred to by the officers. So it has been considered fully and as part of the minutes, it will be documented that we've had a full discussion about it and made references to it. So from my point of view, my understanding is that that is relevant and enough to prove that as a planning committee this has now been fully considered, even though we know that the officers did consider it beforehand. There was just an error, but now it will be included in the minutes. So for me, it's not necessary to defer it. If people wanted to spend 15 minutes reading it, then fine. But.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Tarling.
Exactly what Councillor Rice said. Agree 100%. The point of asking questions of our officers is for clarification, and albeit I would like to see going forward that planning officers reference local plans where available, also having been involved in a local plan. I think they're very important, but the weight that we give local plans, it is important to know that. And if Councillor Farquhar hadn't raised that as an issue, then we might have sat here. Well, some of us might have sat in ignorance of the local plan. But I think Councillor Rice has said, we've got clarification. Councillor Gillett has said, we have the opportunity to read it, or that extract of it, if we don't believe our officers. But I'm inclined to believe our officers when they tell us that it's this is it, and they read out from it. So I'm with Councillor Rice on this. But if anybody is uncomfortable, a simple application like this, should be very straightforward. As Mr. Gould said, it's permitted development in a lot of authorities. It should be fairly straightforward to consider, and to kick this one down the road for another meeting, I think is really poor. Thank you.
Okay, so we've had a. Okay, if we can just adjourn the meeting for a couple of minutes, just for discussion, if we can go offline. Okay, thank you for that. Just a quick adjournment while we sort, in effect, legal advice on the best way to take this forward. And I think for clarity and transparency, adjourning the item, deferring the item to a next meeting would be the most appropriate in view of the report. So the report is the key document that we're referring to, and because it's not specifically calling out the neighbourhood Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan, the advice is that we do defer it. So there won't be a vote. It will be the chairman's decision on that. Oh, we will be voting. Okay, all right. But yeah, as I said, is legal advice is that if we were challenged, because the report does not specifically mention the neighbourhood plan, we would be in a difficult position. So we've had a proposal from Councillor Salmon, seconded by Councillor Martin. So if you're in favour of deferring the item, put your hands up now, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And against?
1, 2, 3.
And abstentions?
2, 3.
Right, so that item will be deferred to a forthcoming meeting. So thank you for the speakers today for turning up, but we will be revising this and revisiting it. Thank you. And that is the last item on the agenda, so I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.